Hey there, good morning guys, or good afternoon or good evening, but I know it's a lot of mornings for you guys. So interesting video, interesting update. So Thorwaldsen, the scientist, doesn't agree with what the Met Office is saying regarding the size of the eruption or the duration of the eruption. So interesting. So they're having a disagreement there. And then there's the Blue Lagoon, my friend, the Blue Lagoon, news about that and what the manager of the Blue Lagoon says about the evacuation and how this went. There's actually a newspaper article about that this morning in the morning newspaper of Iceland. And of course, guys, I have to talk about that, right? So yeah, interesting video, and let's jump right in. So Thorwaldsen is a scientist. I value his opinion very much. And he's a professor of volcanology at the University of Iceland, and he disagrees with the Met Office. And what is this disagreement about? So the Met Office has said, and also Einar Leifsson, he's a natural disaster expert at the Icelandic MET Office. He says nothing seems to be reduced here with that eruption. The situation is unchanged from yesterday, so to speak. It's the most southern tip of the fissure that is close to the Sutnuka crater just east of Sutnuk, where there still seems to be decent activity. And he also said it also seems to continue. So they thought at first that the eruption would be much shorter lived than it actually is. It started on Saturday. So he was asked, the Met Office guy was asked why he thinks that this eruption seems to last longer. And he said that they originally based their estimates on the previous eruptions that we have seen in December, in January, and in February. But he thinks that this eruption is behaving slightly different. And he says it seems to be that the magma is still wanting to come up, and it seems it still has an easy path to come up, and that's why it's still coming up. But he says the lava flow that is heading towards the sea, and we've discussed this in my last video, that is threatening to flow over the road and then into the sea, which could cause toxic gases. It seems to be slowing down, and the lava that's flowing there seems to be cooling down. So there is still some movement, but it is very slow. That's what the Met Office is saying. And now what is Thorwaldsen saying? He is of the opinion that there is not much difference between this eruption and the previous eruptions. He basically thinks they are the same. So he says the eruption that erupted on December 18th, for example, did last about 4 days, and it took some time for it to slow down and solidify. And he believes that this eruption that we're having right now, that we're looking at, will most likely end sometime tomorrow or the day after. And it might even already happen basically overnight or right now. And he thinks that the lava flow was overestimated at the beginning. And he was also asked why he thinks the eruption seems to live longer than expected at first. And he says that he believes that the productivity of the eruption was overestimated at the beginning, and that it was actually considerably less than the 400 cubic meters per second that scientists were talking about initially. So that's why he says the magma that is there, that has flown there, it takes longer to empty because it's not pushing that much out as originally estimated. And he thinks you always have the same volume, and how fast the stuff comes out, it depends on, how much is withdrawing per time unit, per time frame. So the more you take out in the beginning, the sooner you empty it. So, and since he thinks that these measurements were wrong, that there didn't that much come out in the beginning, that would be his explanation why it now lasts a little bit longer. But he says he it looks to him as if the activity is in fact decreasing, and he disagrees with the Met Office that it has remained stable since yesterday. And he says why this is. He says that the Met Office is looking at the eruption and they're interpreting it from just looking at it, coming out of the ground. But he says this is not necessarily a measure of how much volume is coming out, or at least not an accurate measure of it. So Thorwaldur believes that the eruption is being reduced slowly, which makes it more difficult to understand how it is subsiding. But guys, I really wonder, I mean, the guys at the Met Office, they're all scientists. So basically what he says is they're just standing there and looking at the eruption and making their estimates based on that. I don't know if that's really what he means, but it sounds to me a little bit like, well, these guys, right, they're just like tourists looking at it, but they're not really doing the scientific study behind it. But who knows, right? I mean, it's normal that in the science world people disagree. And when it comes to this eruption and this volcanic activity, it's not the first time that other scientists disagree with the Met Office, right? But the Met Office is an official entity in Iceland that releases all the latest updates for the natural disasters, the weather, the eruptions, volcanic activity. So basically, they're the go-to source for the latest information. But, you know, I tend to believe Thorwaldur more because in the past he has also given some statements, and he's usually more a guy that is on the cautious side of things. So it is interesting. I mean, it's not a big deal because it is difficult. No one really knows 100%. I don't think even 90% what is going on underneath the surface. It's just science knows a little bit compared to how complex these volcanic systems are. So this is one of the science that is not progressed so far like other sciences, because it's hard to look into the earth, right? So he says it is slowing down. It's doing small changes. So, but it can be seen, and it can also be seen. One thing that shows it that it's slowing down is also the lava, how far it is progressing and how fast it is progressing, because that has slowed down significantly since yesterday afternoon. So he also says that the gas pollution has been greatly reduced, and that's a good thing, right? They had to, for a short time, they had to evacuate the Svartsengi power plant because of potential gas pollutions. He thinks basically that the length and that the spread of the lava has kind of reached the length that it is possibly able to reach in this eruption, and even while the situation remains kind of the same as it is right now, the lava that is coming out right now, he thinks it's just going to build up on the lava flow that we already have. So not necessarily spreading out further, but building up more height. And I know that the authorities have opened the door for discussion whether they should make the defense walls even higher. So they're looking at data and they're assessing whether they need to make defense walls higher for probably the next eruptions. So lava is building up, and he also says that, you know, this improves the thickness of the lava closest to the crater, but it's not extending the length. So just the height, not the length. And here we are, guys, the Blue Lagoon, a world famous tourist attraction, or should I say potential cooking pot. I'm just kidding, guys. I'm just kidding. It's okay. So The morning newspaper in Iceland released today that it took about 40 minutes to evacuate the Blue Lagoon. So the reports here are different. What we've heard from the Blue Lagoon initially was like 20 minutes, and everyone was wondering how did they do that so fast, because they always needed 40 minutes in the past. So now they're saying it was 40 minutes. And we remember last time the manager wasn't so sure about the data. So I'm always wondering, isn't she on site? I mean, this time it was basically still daytime operation, so a manager might have been on site. I don't know how they do this internally. So 40 minutes, and they said some of the guests were still in the reservoir when the evacuation began at 9 o'clock, which was around the time the first eruption broke out. So we know the eruption started at 8:23. So Helga Arnardottir, she is the manager of the Blue Lagoon and the company's sales, service, and operations department. She says, as she always does, the evacuation went well and without any incidents as far as she knows. So we're like 3 days after. She should know, right? That's what I always wonder. So last time they said it's the reporter's fault that he misunderstood something, but then she said no, it was based on the information I had at the time. So this is always a little bit confusing for me. I don't know about you guys. I just don't have much trust in what they say, if I'm honest. So she also says, although the notice was short, it was possible to evacuate in a balanced manner. I mean, if you've seen the video that one guest posted, also the newspaper MBL has released that video. The link is in the description of this video. It doesn't look so balanced, right? The guests look pretty scared, and they're really and the interesting thing is, I'm reading this from more and more people that they're saying, well, we weren't aware that we could face this, and especially not at the time of booking. And then they were surprised when they were faced with evacuation plans and when they arrived at the Blue Lagoon. But then you're already there. That's too late, right? You want to know ahead of time so that you can make an educated decision whether you really want to go there or not. And really, guys, don't blame the people. It's really, you have to think we are all volcanic freaks sort of thing. We're into this thing. We're monitoring this thing daily. But, you know, if you want to travel somewhere, you're not monitoring every country all the time. So you're thinking, what's famous? Where would I go? And you look at the Blue Lagoon and you're like, oh, this looks nice, right? Let's go there. And yeah, geothermal power plant, but geothermal doesn't sound like a volcano. Of course, everyone knows Iceland is a volcanic country, but you know, many of the people say, well, we weren't aware that this eruption could be so close and that there could be lava flow and that all that has happened. And guys, you have to consider, a lot of you are writing this to me from other countries. You're saying to me, well, our press is not really reporting about this. We didn't know about this. We didn't hear about this, right? So imagine you're just going to the website and you look at the website and it only says all facilities are open, read more. You don't necessarily click it, right? And up until just 2 weeks ago or so, they didn't even mention anything volcanic if you clicked that. It was just, yeah, there might be some earthquakes, blah, 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 right? So that's why I keep saying that, and that's why I don't think we should blame anyone that goes there and is surprised. That should be the job of this establishment. And if you look at the Northern Light Inn, they have it on the front page of their website and they inform the people. So if you want to book that hotel and you go to their website, you know what's going on. And then you can consider whether you would go there or not. So that puts trust to your clients. That's my opinion. And that's why I keep saying this. And so, of course, then she was asked whether she thinks that everything is great, right? Basically, what she is saying, that the representatives of the company are always in good cooperation with the authorities, and that's why it is defensible to maintain operations going in Svartsengi. But unfortunately, the problem is the authorities also don't have the magic wand or the magic, how you call that, the glass bowl where you can see the future. This eruption basically happened with no warning, right? And then you're in that pool and you heard the story. One guy, he just rushing out of the pool, couldn't even put on his underwear, just threw a jacket and left his swimwear. And that doesn't sound too balanced, and that video confirms it. And even in the last evacuation, when we saw the video with Walk With Me Tim and also the other photographer, because some people say Walk With Me Tim did edit that wrong and it's not true. Well, the other photographer has pictures as well, and he confirms, basically his pictures confirm the timing of everything that is going on. And so, yeah, they're saying the Blue Lagoon runs several establishments in Svartsengi, a hotel, a spa, restaurants, and there were about 700 to 800 people inside the Blue Lagoon when the evacuation began. And also the newspaper mentions that video again. So I wonder how long it will take until they receive shit for that, that they're doing this. So Helga Anasdottir was asked if the conditions and the evacuations have scared the guest. And then her answer is that both the guest and the staff have, for the most part, been balanced and calm. I just think, you know, if many people are calm, but the ones that are really scared, and you see that in this video, that shouldn't happen. You shouldn't put people through that, because everyone has a different barrier and level of anxiety, or that might influence them for the future, right? They might, listening to sirens and stuff like this, this can be traumatizing, and I think people should be able to make an informed decision whether they want to be put through that potentially or not, or other stuff that could happen there. The chances are low, but there is a magma chamber underneath, right? And scientists have said it could come to the surface there. It's not super likely right now, but you know, it's also not 0% chance. So that's why I think people should be able to make an informed decision. And she further answers that questions whether the conditions and the evacuation has scared the guest. And she says, well, you can imagine that some guests are naturally sick to their stomachs, but the evacuation went well. I'm tempted to say more, but you know what? Maybe not. That video will get too long. And if you're not new here and if you're a subscriber, you know what I want to say anyways, guys. And if you're new here, watch my other videos about that topic, guys, and then you'll know as well. So yeah, basically she is basing their decisions to stay open. She is basically saying that they're spending time with civil defense departments, that they have evacuation plans, and that they're in contact with the Icelandic MET Office and their hazard and risk assessment, and also that they're in contact with those on the ground, the police chief in Sudurns, and they said that he has basically authorized to keep the business open, as it is always assumed that they would have enough time to evacuate. But listen to this, I think if something goes wrong, we know who will probably take the blame for this, right? It's the police chief of Sudurns, if they so state that. So if I was him, I would be like, ooh, right? And we know that he's not super in favor of people being in the area. So he basically lets people get back to Grindavik, but he also said, at your own risk. I'm not really in favor of this. Of course, Grindavik has additional risk, the crack collapse hazard and all of that. But yeah, one other thing we need to talk about regarding the Blue Lagoon evacuation, and that's what is not so good, and that's basically the tourists' fault. The guests did get out of the Svartsengi area, but then there was some trouble because the guests, these tourists, repeatedly stopped on the side of the road to take pictures of the eruption, and that has clogged the road. So the manager of the Blue Lagoon, she said she heard of this, right? And she said this is certainly bad, and whether it applies to driving from the Blue Lagoon or in general on the main road Reykjanesbrod in these conditions. And she says there is an opportunity for everyone to improve the information of the tourists. So that should be improved, that, you know, get out, leave, do not block the road, because you can't, if you're driving out there, you don't know exactly what's happening behind you and who needs to get out. So just leave, right? Or park somewhere where you do not block the road. But, you know, when you're in the middle of an evacuation, and even for the people that blocked the road that were not coming out of the Blue Lagoon, I mean, you must see that there's cars coming, driving away from what you see back on the sky, that red thing, people leaving the area. So don't block the road. That doesn't make sense. But that stupidity is, unfortunately, you find that all over the world. And this is a phenomenon, a well-known phenomenon, and not good. So that was my update. Another one will come soon, guys. Leave this video a like. If you're new here, I would love for you to subscribe so that I can see you again and you can be on the pulse with Silky. If you're interested in the Titan submersible disaster, check out my playlist. There have been 2 new developments just recently. And also check out my videos about the Boeing disaster, where that whistleblower was, I have to say that weird word because you can't say the real word on YouTube anymore. He was unalive the morning before he was about to testify against Boeing and significant flaws in their manufacturing process. And his friend has stated that he told her, if that ever happens to me, it wasn't me. So what did they do to him? Did someone do something to him? Very interesting topic, guys. I'm also staying on the pulse of that for you guys. I'll leave you alone now, but I hope to see you very, very soon, guys. Stay safe. Bye-bye.